What if the beings we imagine as children aren't just figments of our imagination? What if they have a purpose, something beyond our understanding? Tonight, we delve into three extraordinary accounts of childhood encounters that challenge what we believe about the unseen. In this story, you'll meet a boy who faced a strange, dangerous companion during a feverish week, a woman who recalls a protective presence from her childhood that may have saved her life, and finally, a boy who finds a supernatural predator in the woods. Before we begin, if you enjoy mysterious and spine-chilling stories, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. It helps the channel grow and reach others who love the thrill of the unknown. Now, let's dive in. Just don't forget to keep your lights on. Welcome to Echoes in the Dark. Our first story comes from a man who's now 42, but the events he recounts happened when he was just 8 years old. His family had recently moved into an old, creaky house in a quiet neighborhood. It was the kind of place that seemed to carry whispers of its history in the walls. One week, he fell severely ill with a high fever. Confined to his room, his mother stayed close to care for him. On the second night of his illness, something extraordinary happened. While lying in bed, too weak to get up, he noticed movement at the edge of his vision. From beneath his bed emerged a small figure, no taller than 30 centimeters. The being had a thin, wiry body, disproportionately large eyes, and a face covered in patches of hair. Despite its odd appearance, it smiled and spoke in a soft, almost playful voice. "Want to play a game?" it asked. At first, the games were harmless. They pretended to build castles out of imaginary blocks or played hide and seek, with the figure darting under furniture. But as the days passed, the games grew darker. On the fourth day, the figure approached with a grin and said, "I invented a new game. It's so fun. If you play well, I'll tell you a secret." In its tiny hands, it held kitchen knives from downstairs. The game, tossing the knives in the air and catching them before they hit the ground. Alarmed, the boy refused. The being didn't seem upset, merely disappointed. The next day, it suggested lighting matches to see who could hold their fingers in the flame the longest. Again, he refused. Over time, the games became increasingly dangerous, jumping from the second-story window, climbing onto the roof, and other reckless acts. Each time, he declined. Oddly, the being was never hostile. It simply smiled, almost like it was testing him. Whenever his parents entered the room, the creature would vanish under the bed without a sound. One night, it didn't ask to play. Instead, it sat by the window, gazing out at a dirt path that stretched into the distance. "What are you looking at?" the boy asked. The being turned its large eyes toward him and whispered, "One day, I'll take you beyond that path." The boy shivered but didn't respond. After his illness passed, the being appeared less frequently. By the time he turned 9, it vanished entirely. His family moved when he was 10, and he assumed it was all over. Years later, as an adult, he returned to the neighborhood out of nostalgia. The house had burned down years earlier, leaving only its foundation. Curious, he walked the dirt path the creature had mentioned. It led to an old, overgrown cemetery. Among the graves were several belonging to children, their names and dates barely legible. The connection sent chills down his spine. Was the being tied to those lost souls? And what would have happened if he had agreed to its games? The second account comes from a woman who recalls a peculiar entity she often saw between the ages of 7 and 9. At night, as she lay in bed, her closet door would creak open slightly. From the shadows, a figure would emerge. Unlike the first story, this being wasn't frightening. It was small, about the size of a child, and had a form that seemed to shimmer with soft white light. Its features were indistinct, almost blurry, but its presence felt calm, even protective. At first, she was scared and hid under her blankets, but over time, she grew used to its visits. The being never spoke, never moved closer than a few feet, and always returned to the closet before morning. It seemed to simply observe her. One evening, while playing in the yard, she was about to cross the street to retrieve a ball. Just as she stepped off the curb, she felt something hold her back. She turned to see the being standing behind her, its indistinct form glowing faintly. A car sped by, missing her by inches. Another time, while walking home from school, a stray dog began growling and barking at her. The being appeared suddenly, standing between her and the animal. The dog whimpered and fled. Perhaps the most significant event happened one evening while she was eating alone in the dining room. She began choking on her food, unable to breathe. The being appeared, its glow brighter than ever. It knocked a vase off the table, shattering it loudly. Her parents rushed in, saw her struggling, and saved her. Over the years, she tried to communicate with the being, asking its name, why it was there, or where it came from. It never responded, only tilted its head as if listening. By the time she turned 10, the visits stopped completely. As an adult, she reflects on those experiences with gratitude and curiosity. Who or what was the being? A guardian angel? A figment of her imagination? Or something else entirely? Thomas, now an adult, recalls an event that occurred when he was just 10 years old. His family had recently moved to a quiet countryside home surrounded by dense woods. For him, the woods were a playground, full of endless adventures waiting to be discovered. But those woods hid something far more sinister than he could have imagined. It started innocently enough. On the second day in their new home, Thomas was playing outside when he heard something unusual: laughter. It was faint but distinct, a deep, almost guttural laugh that didn't belong to any animal he knew. He ran back to tell his parents, but they dismissed it, saying it was probably a bird or the wind. But Thomas knew better. The laughter was too human, too mocking. Over the next few days, the laughter returned, always at the same time, just before dusk. It echoed faintly from the woods, drawing him closer to the tree line. He asked his parents if they could hear it, but they always shook their heads. "You're imagining things," they'd say. But Thomas wasn't imagining it. He could hear it as clearly as his own heartbeat. On the fourth evening, curiosity got the better of him. He ventured deeper into the woods, the laughter growing louder with each step. Then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he saw it. High up in the branches of an old oak tree, there was a figure. At first glance, it looked like a man, but the way it moved was anything but human. It leaped from one tree to another with an unnatural, animalistic grace, its limbs bending in ways no human limbs should. The figure stopped on a branch directly above him. It crouched like a predator, staring down at him with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce the growing darkness. And then it laughed. The sound was deafening, like nails on a chalkboard mixed with mocking glee. Thomas stood frozen in fear, unable to run, unable to speak. The figure tilted its head almost as if studying him, and then it whispered in a voice that didn't belong in this world. "Lost, are we?" Thomas turned and bolted, the laughter chasing him all the way back to his house. For days he refused to go near the woods, but the laughter didn't stop. Every evening, just as the sun set, it would echo through the trees. His parents still couldn't hear it, and his fear grew with each passing day. A week later, his older cousin came to visit. Thomas, desperate for validation, told him everything and convinced him to explore the woods together. His cousin laughed it off as a wild story, but he agreed to come along. The two boys ventured into the woods, and for a while, everything seemed normal. They could hear birds chirping and the hum of insects all around them. Tomas began to doubt himself, wondering if it had all been in his head. But as they approached the old oak tree, the atmosphere changed. The natural sounds of the forest, the birds, the insects, the rustling leaves, all stopped. It was as if the woods were holding their breath. Thomas's cousin didn't seem to notice at first and started climbing the tree to prove there was nothing there. But as he reached the middle of the tree, the silence was broken by that same haunting laughter. This time, it was louder than ever, echoing from every direction. Thomas's cousin froze, his face pale, as the branch he was holding began to creak ominously. A moment later, a heavy branch fell, missing his cousin by inches. He scrambled down the tree and the two boys ran as fast as they could, the laughter following them until they broke through the tree line and reached the safety of the house. For Thomas, this was the final straw. He never entered the woods again, and the laughter eventually stopped. Both stories leave us with more questions than answers. What were these beings, and what did they want? In the first story, the small creature's dangerous games and cryptic words suggest something sinister, yet it never forced the boy to act against his will. Could it have been a malevolent spirit, or was it testing his character? The cemetery adds an eerie layer to the tale, hinting at a possible connection to the restless souls of children. The second story feels different, almost benevolent. The glowing figure seemed to protect the girl, saving her life on multiple occasions. Its silence, however, leaves room for speculation. Was it a guardian spirit, a projection of her subconscious, or something entirely unknown? These encounters remind us of the thin veil between our world and the mysterious forces that may exist beyond it. Children, with their openness and unfiltered perception, might be more attuned to these phenomena. But as adults, we're left wondering, were these experiences mere childhood fantasies, or did these individuals truly glimpse something from the other side? Perhaps the answer lies in the shadows, waiting for us to find the courage to look. Remember, if you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Sharing your thoughts helps the channel grow and keeps these stories alive. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.